Welcome to Pondering, Play and Therapy,
where we set out to explore the importance of play in our everyday lives and how this can also be therapeutic. We'll be discussing our own experiences in the hope that others may ponder play in their own lives too.
Welcome to this episode of Pondering, Play and Therapy with me, Philippa. And this week, my guest is Mandy Jones Fisher. She's a licensed clinical social worker and registered play therapist in Chicago, US of A. She is also a certified Theraplay practitioner, trainer and supervisor, and the former executive director of the Theraplay Institute. Mandy was my supervisor and the person that supported me in my Theraplay training and becoming certified. But Mandy has extensive training in sand tray therapy. She's worked almost exclusively with adopted and fostered families since she began her career. She takes a particular interest in helping families with young children form strong attachments and work through sensory concerns. Mandy is also experienced in helping adoptive individuals with identity loss and anxiety concerns throughout the lifespan. More recently, Mandy has been focusing her clinical work on helping children born during the height of COVID-19 who are struggling with overwhelming anxiety. While Mandy doesn't regularly practice law, through her legal work, she has advocated for children in both Illinois and Michigan children welfare system. She continues to use her legal knowledge and advocacy skills to help families gain individualized education programs and other essential resources for children. Mandy earned her BA in political science and a BS in psychology from Lola. Is that the row I say that, Mandy?
Loyola
University, Chicago. And now you are currently running a private therapy practice which serves children under the age of 8 and their families in Chicago. Goodness, Mandy, are you 70 with all that experience that you've got there? Wow.
And I think the important part that's led me here is that I have my master's in social work and my law degree. So in the United States, those additional credentials are important ones for becoming licensed and doing what we do. But yeah, no, I'm not 70, but work a lot. My husband would probably say that I don't do well with idle time, and I'm always going to fill it with something. And I don't know if that's something for my therapist to work through, if that's a good thing or not, but yet here we are.
Social work in America is slightly different than the social worker in the UK. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it is. In the United States, the vast majority, I shouldn't say vast majority, but the mental health services are provided either by psychologists, which is doctoral level, or master's level social workers, master's level professional counselors, or master's level marriage and family therapists. So the combination of those latter three positions, we do very similar work, but based upon our training, just the family systems and the way we approach theoretically working with families and children is a little bit different. But in terms of our credentials and the ability to do that work, it is very similar. And the three professions of clinical social worker, professional counselor, and marriage and family therapist do the primary work in the United States of mental health services, mental health therapy for children and families, as well as adults, of course, and then psychologists doing that work as well.
Okay. And so I guess we're going to come on to your experience of play, but I suppose for us in the UK, when we think about the healthcare system in the States, it's different, isn't it, than the UK? We get free access, however broken that is and however long our waiting lists are. There is free access for these services. Is that the same way where you guys are?
Oh, definitely not. No. So everyone has, I shouldn't say everyone has, but in order to gain access to most healthcare in the United States, you need to have some sort of insurance, whether There's private insurance that is provided by your employer, or the government does provide insurance for either seniors, the older population, that is our Medicare program, or Medicaid, which is insurance for those who make very little, are impoverished, or have some other level of subsidy. So, for example, if a child is adopted out of the foster care system, they will be given a medical card until they turn 18 or 21, depending on the state, and then they will be entitled to state services. However, this is what gets tricky, is that individual providers like myself, we have to go through what's called an impaneling process. And we say, okay, I'm willing to take that insurance, or I'm not willing to take that insurance. And those pay rates are different. They are different based upon where you are geographically, educational level, and truly whatever the insurance companies decide. And each insurance company pays clinicians different rates. And so there are some insurances that for mental health providers are just not financially viable for us to take. So, for example, my partners and I, we only take one insurance because it's just not financially viable for us to run our business to be able to take the other insurance policies that pay us less, because we are given a contracted rate that even if I charge my hourly rate to people who don't have that insurance policy, or that type of insurance, by being contracted with this insurance company, I have to take a lower rate. And I cannot, what's called balance bill, I cannot bill the difference to the client. I have to do that as a write-off. So it's also a horribly broken system.
Wow. In the UK, all our children, whatever age they are, would be able to access, if they have a need, a service. The services might have long waiting lists, people have lots of views on it, but in theory, you can, if you're a child under the age of 18, access a level of child service or a level of the IEPs that you're talking about in there, the education programs, all those sorts of things. Is that the same in the States? Do all children get insurance regardless?
Theoretically, yes. In execution, no.
Okay.
So theoretically, yes. If a family doesn't have or can't afford to include children under 18 on their employer provided health insurance, or parents themselves are on Medicaid or Medicare, then children, yes, are given that state insurance. So, yes. However, they still need to be registered. Parents need to be able to go through the process to get that and to get it documented, and be able to get the insurance in the United States. Not to turn this podcast political, but we have a very large issue right now, and always have, but it's more at our forefront with immigration. And so children who are here and perhaps their parents don't have the proper documentation may not be able to get services, or may not be able to get that insurance, or they may, depending on their parents, depending on a lot of different factors. And so theoretically, yes, every kid is eligible. Does that actually happen? Not necessarily. And additionally, a lot of providers do not take state insurance because the payment rates to folks like myself are low. The documentation required would put me out of business, and the amount of time it takes to get reimbursed, depending on the state and the work you're doing, can take up to 6 months. And so my small business, I can't afford to see a client and wait 6 months to get paid for it. And the amount of paperwork I'd have to do that you don't get paid for doing the paperwork makes it so that I'm not able to see kids with medical cards. And so those tend to be the places that do see children with medical cards, as you said, tend to have very long wait lists. A lot of those professionals are overworked, underpaid. They are primarily in our community mental health programs, which are often, not always, but are very often clinicians right out of school. So they are not yet seasoned practitioners. Many of them are working towards their clinical licensure. And so they haven't had the time to develop a ton of expertise. And the turnover rate is usually pretty high. And so the kids who are really most vulnerable are not always getting the best care, not because the clinicians don't care. That's not it at all. It's just They're young, they're green, or they're overworked with a very large caseload and don't always have access to the expensive trainings that many of us have access to, thinking about a product of Theraplay, as you said, which if I were paying for that out of pocket is not affordable. Same thing with EMDR and a lot of other training modalities, or therapeutic modalities, I should say, makes it really hard. So I think every country has its own problems, I suspect, with
Mm.
mental health services, and the US is certainly no different in that, and that we are a pretty broken system.
So, what led you into this, Mandy? Did you always enjoy playing and engaging with people, or is it something that happened as you started your career?
But I wrote as a winding one. So as a kid, I always wanted to help people. I was an only child, or still am an only child. And my parents and I, we lived in the middle of nowhere in farmland, rural Wisconsin. And my parents were definitely playful, definitely engaging. I also, until I started first grade, my grandmother, my great grandmother, and my grandpa watched me, and my great grandmother especially. Lots of playing, lots of singing, but it didn't really register to me that that was of vital importance to me until I got older. But as a kid, I remember asking my parents if I could start doing volunteer work, which we are not a religious family. That is not where that came from. My parents were like, sure, what you want to do, kiddo? And so I tried a couple of different things. I was like, I just really want to commit my life to helping people. And for a hot minute, I was like, doctors. And I was like, just kidding, hate blood, not doing that. My parents are very much into Law and Order, the television series. And so I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. That's what I'm going to do. And so I actually went to college with the plan that I was going to be an attorney, but I didn't want to be the attorney that made a lot of money. I wanted to be the attorney that helped people, the people who, some sort of legal aid. And I thought I wanted to work in immigration and international law and really working in the American immigration system. And in my dual degree program, I was working towards my degree in political science, again, working towards being an attorney. And I was really interested in psychology. And I had an opportunity to join a research team that was looking at children's memory and the way language helps to encode memories. And so there were two play situations, one with a very elaborate, like, where would you use this? Where would you see this? Where else have you seen this before? Versus, do you like this? What color is it? The way that we're making connections
Mm.
in the brain. And so that this research study had moms and toddlers yeah, like 3 and 4 year olds play, and mom's given one script or another, and then they would interview the kiddos over time to see how much they remembered of that play experience. And then they started a smaller related but separate study that had a researcher, me, go in and have very similar play experience with kids in Montessori schools that were, again, 3 and 4 years old. And it was a pretend camping experience. So we had magnetic fishing poles and we had a little grilling set. And so I would go and play for 15, 20 minutes using this script of play. And then afterwards, we would go and interview the kids a week after, 3 months later, 6 months later, and a year later. And then encoded it was all recorded and coded it. And it was really through this experience that I was like, man, 3 and 4 year olds are the best humans. They are so authentically themselves. They have no filter. They are funny. They are funny, funny little beings. And I was like, I really love really little kids, which I didn't know that I knew that about myself. And so then as I entered law school, I was like, actually, I want to work in the foster care system because I was
Mm.
like, okay, who are truly some of the most vulnerable humans on earth? And it is kids in foster care. And so my plan was to get I told you this is a long, winding story, Philippa. Sorry, I'm trying to make it short. And here we are. So I decided in getting my law degree that I was going to find a program where I could also get my master's in social work because I thought understanding family systems and child development, it would make me a better lawyer in the foster care system. And so I was doing my law degree and my master's of social work at the same time through Michigan State University, and realized partway through this 4 year program that I actually liked my social work therapy experiences much more than I liked the lawyering stuff. And so I completed both degrees. All of my internships were in child welfare, both on the legal side and on the social work side. So I knew no matter what I was doing, I was working with kids. And I was really fortunate that my program was very heavily play based therapy.
Mm.
And I had a focus in child welfare. And so I had several professors who were registered play therapists. My final internship on the therapy side, my internship placement, my supervisor was a sand tray professional, and she was also very much into child centered play therapy. And so my deep play therapy clinical training came from her in that very first experience before I even graduated. So I graduated both programs. I sat for the bar. I am licensed in the state of Illinois as an attorney, though I don't practice. And as soon as I graduated, I never intended to practice, but I was like, I made it this far. Might as well take that big, awful test because if I don't take it now, I never will. And yeah, I immediately started working in therapy. So that's kind of my long, winding road.
But that's a great way in because you've got both sides, haven't you, of what
Yeah.
goes on. You mentioned sand tray in there, and when I read your bio out, we mentioned sand tray. What's that, Mandy? What is sand tray?
So sand tray, you start with a tray of sand. Usually it's blue, though that's in its truest form. And it's, I realize you can't see me as I'm holding my arms out. It's maybe about, I don't know, 2 feet by 3 feet or so. You come in different shapes and sizes, but the idea being that you take miniature figurines and provide them to the client. It's meant to be non-directive, but an external representation of what they're experiencing internally. And they can use the miniatures to play out or to represent um, how they're processing the world, how they're processing their feelings, how they're processing emotion. You, as the therapist, are holding space, and that containment that happens within the tray is very powerful. The other thing that I love about sand tray is that it's so tactile and that there's a high sensory component to being able to touch the sand, to be able to feel the sand run through your hands, the feel and experience and weight of different miniatures and the visual representation of different miniatures, and then being able to verbally process it in ways that you're like, I didn't necessarily say that, notice or experience that was in me as a client. And so I think it's a very powerful, I wouldn't call it expressive arts, but definitely a more right brained approach to therapy. And that there's a playful component to it. I think that's like the quick and dirty explanation of it. Of course, it's way more detailed, and you can bring in other professionals who can speak even better to it than I can. But it's definitely a modality that I really enjoy.
I do wonder if parents listening to this and think sand tray, well, my kids would just go and play in the sand. They wouldn't do anything. And does that happen? Do they just come and play in the sand, or does something happen when they come into that therapy space that play just turns into something more?
It turns into something more. And I think what's also different from maybe how parents experience it is that the child isn't sitting in the box, they are standing next to it. And that it's really much more about the miniatures and the metaphorical representation of what the metaphors stand for in terms of the child's experience, the child's existence, or the adult. I have done plenty of sand trays with adults, couples, whole families. So I think that's the other thing that's really lovely about sand tray is while we may think of it as starting with children, it doesn't have to just be with kids. And I sometimes at the end of a really rough day, as a way to process how I'm holding the day myself, is I might just go and make my own sand tray as a way to get out whatever is in me, as a way of doing my own trauma processing from holding other people's traumas. I'll go and take some of my miniatures and make a tray and be like, oh, wow, that is okay. That's what needed to come out today. And so it is very different from kids just playing in the sand because of the role of the miniatures.
Yeah. Okay. So you did that at university, you learned about that, and then you left and decided to take the bar, become a lawyer, but not practice. You
Correct.
went into social work, and what's that like? What did you do then? And how did you use play there? Or here, when we think about social work, we think about somebody who's filling in forms, trying to manage risk situations, supporting families to receive stuff. It's not really a therapeutic role unless, I mean, I am a social worker. but I had to specialize.
Hmm.
Generally, you stay within a system that you are almost like a case manager rather than a therapist.
Got it. So I came out and immediately became a therapist. But let me tell you, it was my first job was not doing what I expected I would be doing, as I think many of us are when we first
Hmm.
graduated. Plus, we're in our early to mid 20s. In the United States, this tends to be the age that you might graduate from university or your master's program. I was a ripe age of 26, and you take the first job you can get because you've now got to pay back student loans and pay rent and feed yourself and all of those things. My very first job that a friend had recommended me for was doing substance abuse counseling and starting an adolescent program. I didn't know, I don't know if I could say, I didn't know a damn thing about
Mm.
alcohol, drugs, other than my own experience having experimented in my younger days. My first day on the job, I learned I was working in a methadone clinic, and my silly little 26-year-old self was like, "Isn't methadone a street drug?" And my supervisor, I kid you not, was like, "Your first assignment, go Google drugs." And I was like, "Okay." So I went on to learn about drugs. And I didn't know what to do because my experience was all in play and my caseload was all adults. And then because I quote unquote worked with kids, this agency was like, well, you can figure out how to start an adolescent program, primarily focusing on teens' use of marijuana who are mostly court mandated. And I'm like, oh, this is also so out of my wheelhouse. But yeah, sure, why not? And because I didn't know what to do with these adults, I just started pulling out all my board games. And I
Mm.
remember playing like Barrel of Monkeys and using how the monkeys connected to each other to talk about life experiences of if one monkey falls off, what does that mean? How can we make a metaphor out of their life for that? And I remember taking the game of Sorry and using that as ways of processing different choices they could have made in life to get us to different places. And at first, the adults I was working with were like, oh no, I am not doing that, especially those who were court mandated to see me. But then after a while, they're like, yeah, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't so terrible. But I was only there for 4 months. And then, as is often the case, when you're working in this is a community mental health agency, we lost state funding. My position was then eliminated after only being there for 4 months. And then I ended up getting a job, and this is what led me to where I am now. I got a job with another very large, I believe it is the largest community mental health agency in Chicago, working in a program called Adoption Support and Preservation. And the goal of that program was to provide free mental health therapy for children and families who had adopted through any means. It could have been private adoption, could have been foster care, could have been kinship adoption. It didn't matter so long as the family was touched by adoption. It was up to 2 years of free therapy in home or in school, and with the goal of avoiding disruption in the adoption process or post adoption, I should say, because this really came from a lawsuit filed by children of the state where there was a very large number at one point in the 80s and 90s of failed adoptions and children being rehomed. And so this program was put in place to help stabilize families who might be at risk. And so that was all home-based work. And it was through that program, every therapist in that program, we were required to undergo Theraplay training. And so that was where I got my initial Theraplay training. And from there, the rest is kind of history. So I did that job for about 3.5 years before I burned out. Yeah,
So, do you want to talk about Theraplay? I am trained in Theraplay, and Julie is trained in Theraplay. But I have to say, we haven't actually talked about Theraplay on any of our podcasts. Obviously we talk about play a lot, but I don't think we've actually explained what Theraplay is. So you
sure.
were worked your way through and ended up as the executive director of the
Yes,
Theraplay Institute in Chicago. And that really is the home of Theraplay. And
correct.
everybody else in the world who does Theraplay all is funneled somehow through the Theraplay Institute in Chicago. Is that
Correct.
right? And Theraplay is
That
a
is
very specific form of play, isn't it? So do you want to
Yes.
explain what that is and then maybe how it touches the world?
Sure. So Theraplay is a structured type of play therapy that utilizes the strength of the parent-child relationship to effectuate change. That's it at its core. And so Theraplay is premised on four dimensions of the parent-child connection being structure, engagement, nurture, and challenge. Those are the four dimensions. And so we as a therapist really hold the relationship as our client versus just the child or just the parent, because attachment is a dance. And if one part of the dance partners gets out of sync or gets out of step, it's up to both of them to figure out how to get back into step. And so if we can strengthen that relationship, it provides the resilience for lifelong positive mental health. And so that's really, in a very, very basic nutshell, what Theraplay is premised on. And it's rooted in attachment theory and attachment therapy. And so,
Would you have loads of toys then, Mandy? Loads of toys that
no,
people, a whole kit that you need.
no, Theraplay is also premised on, it turns out the things that parents, the securely attached parents, let's put it that way, what parents do in the rocking, the swinging, the cooing, the cuddling, the mirroring, the my baby sticks his or her tongue out and I stick my tongue out back because, and then we both giggle. All of those things, it turns out that the brain science people are like, oh, this is what builds healthy people. And so we don't need, just like we don't need a lot of toys with infants, we don't need a lot of toys to recreate. That's for kids who, for whatever reason, those experiences went off course. And so we, as parents to infants, we are the most exciting plaything. Sure, we might have rattles or stuffies or the mats that we put kiddos down with little mirrors and swingy things, but we are always going to be more interesting than those things to itty bitty babies. And so that's our goal in Theraplay, is to adapt those concepts to be more age appropriate, but that the interactions should still be between me as the therapist facilitating that connection between the parent and child. So I don't need a ton of stuff to do that. Might I need a few things? Sure, but it's things like cotton balls, feathers, bubbles, balloons, a blanket. We do a lot of feeding in Theraplay, so snacks. Trying to think. I mean, those are crepe paper or streamers. I'll use those sometimes. Toilet paper for chopping, because I can make those in a good karate chopping space out of toilet paper. But I think that's the other benefit of Theraplay, especially for new practitioners, is that it's not expensive to get started in this modality. The training itself is definitely the most costly of it, but it doesn't take a lot to get this going in your work. And the lovely part is it doesn't take much for parents to be able to do this work at home either.
And so it doesn't really work with teenagers then if you're doing that babying stuff.
It does, actually. It does work
Okay.
really well with teenagers as well. Is it going to look a little bit different? Yes. Am I probably going to have to add, when we're talking about those four dimensions, I'm probably going to need to use more challenge, because that's how teenagers are going to engage with me. Am I going to be able to rock a teenager in my arms to soothe and care for them and nurture them? No. But can I give a really great manicure as a way to take care of them? Yeah, I sure can. And so it is going to look a little bit different. I am going to need to adapt some activities. If we don't have a secure attachment as infants and toddlers and 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds, we're not going to have a secure attachment at 12, 18, 22, 35, and so on. And so we need to go back and heal that. And so that attachment is so necessary at any age. And the beautiful thing is that we can always heal it. And so if we take a teenager back to that experience of having felt safety and creating emotional containment within someone who is bigger, stronger, kinder, wiser, and caring for them, it works really beautifully. But does it look different than me doing Theraplay with my precious 4-year-olds? Yeah, of course it does. Also, their bodies are bigger, and probably, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit different. I'm probably going to use more sarcasm. I'm probably going to be cursing, because that's teenagers' natural language. And so, but am I going to curse with a 4-year-old? Definitely not.
So the teenagers and the young people engaging it. What about the parents? Are the parents involved in this, or is it just you as a therapist and the child Because if you're building attachments, the parents are the most important thing in that. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. You've actually got it. You've definitely got it right. Because I don't know about you, Philippa, but my kids aren't coming home with me.
Mm.
I don't want to bring my clients home. I don't want to move into their homes. And so you're absolutely right. I need to incorporate the parents from the very beginning to build the attachment between them. So my role is to facilitate that. So in the beginning, I'm going to be more of a leader directing things between parent and child. And then as the treatment progresses, turning over that leadership in time to the parent. So that way the parents then become front and center. And I back myself further and further out of the treatment so that the parents can do this without me. I think the best therapists out there are the ones who do their work so well that they can essentially put themselves out of business. Of course, that's never the case because there's another family who's going to need us, but we want our families to do well without us. If we can empower parents to do this work, then they don't need to see us anymore. And that's a beautiful thing.
I think that's the thing, isn't it, about Theraplay is it's like a happy sad.
Yeah.
That's what I think is that you get to a point where they don't need you anymore, but you might have spent 18 months, 2 years
Yeah.
building relationships with a family and really love your family and your child, but they don't need you anymore. So it's
Yeah.
really, I don't know about you, but I'm really happy that they've built that security in one another. They've built that joy. They've built that connection. And that's a great thing that you, like you say, you do yourself out of that role. But it's a little bit sad sometimes for the families, for the little people, and for us that you're not going to see them once a fortnight or once a week, and that. But it's a happy sad. It's
It is a happy, sad. Yeah. And those termination sessions are are hard ones for everyone because like you said, it's very much it's bittersweet. The other thing I will say is that over the years of doing this, I have a number of families who regularly reach out, who will send an email or a text with a picture and just say, thought of you today. Here's a picture of how kiddo is doing. That really warms my heart when it's thinking about the boundaries that I think our profession puts in place to say once they're no longer your client, you shouldn't have a relationship with them anymore, which I think is, of course, there are reasons for that, but it also is a hard rule, ethical rule when we are humans. And like you said, we spend 18, sometimes 2, 3, 5 years with families helping them heal to then one day no longer be a part of each other's lives. That I think is opposite of the human experience of building relationships.
mm,
And so I think that when I do get those responses from clients, I always respond and say, thank you so much for sharing with me. And or get the occasional holiday card or the occasional drawing of something or another. And it just is okay. So this is why we do this work.
absolutely. And just knowing, I know that I've had little ones that have left or big ones, and then they come and say, oh gosh, they did this school play this week, or they've started this new activity or new club and they couldn't have done that. The joy that you feel as a therapist in your heart, it really hurts your heart, but in a really nice way, isn't it? That
Yeah.
that those little people or big people are now
Yeah.
achieving something, and you have been a really small part of that, but that is just amazing, isn't it? It's an honor, I think, a
It is.
massive honor to have that exchange,
It's an
really.
yeah, it's an honor. It's humbling. I think it puts us in a unique place that a lot of other healthcare professionals don't see. I'm not inviting my primary care physician to my kid's high school graduation.
Mhm.
We do sometimes get invited to those things. And I think it's really hard because our profession, at least in the United States, says that we have to put that boundary up that we shouldn't be part of those. But I don't know about you, but certainly at my core, I don't go to them. But I'm like, oh my gosh, do I want to go see my client star in their school play that took
Yeah.
them months to work up to doing? Yeah, I would love to be there. Or do I want to go join their soccer game or watch them? Of course, yes, I would love to do that. But are we allowed to? No. And it really stinks. The boundaries within our profession are they're there for a reason, but stink sometimes.
Mm. Well, you can celebrate it in your heart, can't you? And
Yeah,
celebrate
you sure
it
can.
for them. But yes, those boundaries are
Yep.
there to protect us all, aren't they? And also,
Yeah,
Mandy, however many clients you have, there's a point where you just
right.
can't keep doing
Can't
all
fit
those
all of it.
things.
It's so
Physically, there's a
true.
good reason that the boundaries are there, but yeah, celebrating
Absolutely.
it in your heart is fine. So you've moved on from Theraplay. So you did a period of time during Theraplay, during the COVID period, which was really a
Yeah.
hard period for everybody. And
Yeah.
Theraplay went
Yeah, it was.
online, and that's
Yep.
hard. Doing any therapy
That was very
online
hard.
is that therapy is really important to be in person, I think, and just being in the
Yes.
same physicality of somebody. And that COVID, I think, was very difficult. And
Yes.
were there during that period. How was that for you?
That was awful. We shut down the office. We went virtual. We laid off about 2/3 of our staff. Those of us who remained, the few staff members for a couple of weeks, months. I don't know. I don't have a great concept of time. We were down to 80% of our pay, but we're still working probably double what we were working before to try to keep things moving. Those people who work with me closely know that my best ideas always come to me in the shower. And so one of my shower ideas was, let's create the modules. And so we created the Theraplay modules as a way to, like you said, adapt Theraplay training online. So Andrea Bushala, she and I worked together to write them and then pilot them. That was a very, very big undertaking. We were planning to have our in-person play conference in 2020 that we then shifted to make that online, and I turned it into the Summer Learning Institute. Because at that point, I was the program director. Um,
I know
and so it was,
I had
yeah,
tickets and my
I know.
flights booked, and we were going to meet
I
in
know.
person, weren't we?
Yes, we were.
I was bringing my mom. We'd got all
Yes, yes, you
that
were.
booked. And
Yes.
yeah, that
Yeah.
COVID thing was like, you're not going. Um,
Yeah. It was devastating. It was awful. It was so hard. We then gave up the office. We moved into a new office in the height of the pandemic. We were trying to shift very quickly because we had a clinic at the time to get our clinicians to continue seeing the clients that we were seeing in the clinic to be able to do it safely. So clinicians with the Theraplay Institute were working, doing Theraplay sessions in parks and in garages with garage doors open and like trying to get as creative as possible to not lose total contact because Theraplay, it can be done online. I don't, and there are a lot of clinicians who adapted it very well, but I was not one of those people. I am an in-person therapist. I'm terrible at virtual work. So yeah, it was a hard time. I don't think this is a 0 out of 5 stars experience. Would not do again.
no. And then there's an impact, isn't there, of COVID? And I've talked to other professionals, and we often think about with parents, my teen really was impacted when they didn't go to school, when they
Hmm.
couldn't see their friends, and there's been a big impact. And you've moved from the Theraplay Institute now, and you've set up your own practice, Nurturing Roots.
I
Is
did.
that right?
Yeah, Nurtured Roots. Nurtured Roots Counseling and Consulting. Yep, I sure did.
And you're seeing the impact now in your clinic of that time of COVID.
Yeah, yeah. So because I specialize in kids under 8, what I'm seeing is a lot of these 4, soon to be 5-year-olds who were born in the midst of COVID, who were delivered in 2020 or early 2021, and the impact that all of us experienced anxiety. I don't know. I'm sure there's someone out there, but I haven't met them who was like, yeah, COVID was a great time. I really enjoyed that experience. All of us were impacted by it. None of us knew what was coming next.
Mm.
None of us knew how long it was going to be like this, right? In the beginning, we were like, oh, we'll work from home for 2 weeks. Let's stock up on all the snacks and the toilet paper, and then it's going to be fine. And it wasn't. It wasn't fine for a long time. And so the babies born into that, thinking about several of my clients were born so early on that either some of them, their dads weren't allowed to be in the hospital when they were born. There were clients who the kiddos were immediately removed from mom because they didn't know if babies could catch it. And so then that immediate separation for the first day or 2 days, or moms being really diligently tested and isolated. So the delivery being really difficult. And then, or the babies who were born in like July, August, September of 2020, those final months of mom's pregnancy, just full of adrenaline and cortisol from all of that unknown anxiety, which baby is just banking in, right? And then they come out and parents were isolated. They didn't have the
Mm.
support systems that were the community comes around new parents and provides them with support and meals, and grandparents are there or siblings or whatever. And now parents are alone, and the parents who then got COVID in the midst of this and who are trying to work from home. And it was just, all of us were just functioning in anxiety and doing the best we could to survive, not to mention
Wow.
a new baby. And so the little ones I'm seeing are really just functioning in states of anxiety because that's what their little brain
Mm.
and biochemistry was developed in.
I guess in
So, yeah,
isolation, that isolation for parents and not knowing,
yeah,
and as a new parent with a new baby, you learn from people around you how to do things, don't
yes,
you? And if you
yes,
haven't got that, so you've got the stress of COVID and being on your own, and then the stress of, am I doing this right? And
yes,
and even though most parents can and do, you need that reassurance, don't you, from your own parents or from
hmm,
your friends or from your siblings or from the
hmm,
toddler groups, the baby groups, the
yes,
GPs. And
yes,
and not to have that must have been so horrendous. And that anxiety remains even after the pregnancy.
yeah. The other thing I've seen in some families, there are two additional complicating factors. For some, just naturally a very significant enough portion of women develop postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. Moms who had that's just part of the hormone shift after delivery were struggling with that and not being seen and not being monitored the same way because they just don't have as many people who are checking in on them. And so that contributing to the postpartum experience for moms really being difficult. And then I've also worked with several families where either mom or dad, one of them got COVID and then had to isolate. So then you're a brand new parent, but also totally isolated parent, even from your
Mm,
partner, because
mm,
they've had to isolate another part of your home. So, and then the fear and concern about your partner having COVID, it's just the complicating factors. It's like, no wonder when these sweet, adorable little nuggets are coming in, just being little walking balls of anxiety and presenting in a couple of primarily the same few ways, but coming into my office, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense.
mm.
And something that in the height of COVID, none of us could have anticipated that this is how some kids were going to function. Of course, there are plenty of 4 and 5 year olds who are doing just fine. I don't want to
Yeah.
pathologize that all kids are doing poorly. Some parents handled it really well, were better resourced, had different outlets. Maybe they had a bubble so that way they could have those safe interactions. There are definitely those families that were very resilient in this. So I don't want to minimize that. But the ones who are doing okay are the ones coming into my office.
No. So how do you use play within that, Mandy? So you use Theraplay,
Yeah.
you use Sand Tray,
Yeah.
do you use other types of play?
Those little kids, I am primarily using Theraplay because we need to help parent and child work together in reducing that anxiety, creating structure so that child has felt safety and connection, and parents feel better resourced. So for the kiddos that we were just talking about, those sweet little COVID babies, primarily using Theraplay. But because I do see kids for other needs, I have a very fairly sizable sand tray miniatures collection. So I'll do some sand tray. I also have a full non-directive room. So I have a couple of kids who very much are into the
So
kitchen and baby dolls.
what's non-directive for people that are listening that aren't therapists?
Sure. So my playroom is I have a bunch of toys that are well organized, so it's not overwhelming coming in. That there's a section with like Lego and building blocks and construction toys, and then I have baby dolls with all of the stuff that comes with baby dolls, the diapers, the bottles, the strollers, what have you. I've got a whole section of stuffies. I have some board games. I have a kitchen that has all the plate food, cash register. I've got some sensory toys. I have a very large bot bag. I have swords and pool noodles for doing battle. And the idea behind non directive or child centered play is that the child comes in and selects the toys and the materials that they need to play out whatever is going on inside of their body, inside of their mind. And my role as the therapist is to track that, at times to reflect it back to the child, to be the one that is holding the space for them. If they draw me into their play, then I will be part of it. So for kitchen, for example, if they want to make me a meal and serve me a meal, then I am going to be there to receive it. Or with the swords and the pool noodles, often I am the one that they are doing battle against. And so then my role as the therapist is based upon my training experience is to then interpret what they're working through. Children's natural language is play as opposed to talking and cognitive processing. And so they're playing out the themes that are in their mind and in their body. They're playing that out. And so it's then my role to interpret that and use the space and use the supplies to help them to progress and consolidate and work through whatever it is that they're experiencing.
That sounds really interesting. So you've got quite a lot going on in the clinic. Do you still do training? Do you still do guest speaking? Do you do other things outside of that as well, Mandy?
Of course I do, Philip, because I don't like idle time. Here we come full circle. So yes, I still do Theraplay training. So even though I'm not an employee of the Theraplay Institute any longer, I am still doing Theraplay training. I am doing Theraplay supervision. I am just a few hours away from completing my registered play therapist supervisor certification. And so I'm hoping by summer I will be an RPTS so that I can provide supervision for other people working towards their registered play certification. I have been in this last year on the conference circuit, so I am presenting at a number of conferences. Um, I do other trainings on child development, on adoption trauma, on foster care. Uh, yeah, I think those are the main things. I'll do a little bit of consulting here or there on child welfare issues. Something that I'm interested in, and we'll see where it goes, is serving as an expert witness in child welfare cases if need be. If that is testifying doesn't scare me like I know it does a lot of other professionals. Let's use that legal experience in a little bit of a different way. And so, yeah, we'll see where this goes. I just started the practice in July of this past year. So it's only been about 7 months or so. And I'm really excited for where this next chapter of my professional career takes.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we'll put a link in the description of the episode. I'll put a link to your website. So if people are interested in finding out more about you or contacting you, then they'll be able to do that through the website. Is that right? Is there a contacts page or, yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yep, there is. You got it.
perfect. And you do offer these things outside of the States, don't you? Because I am in the UK and you, for a period of time, were my supervisor going through the Theraplay training.
You were actually my very first supervisee.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that
Yeah,
one
you
then.
set the bar very high.
That's very kind of you, Mandy. But maybe you just didn't know any difference at that time.
We both had some things to learn.
Yeah, definitely. I am still learning. But yeah, so thank you very much, Mandy, for
Thank
being
you.
part of this podcast. Like I say, I will put the website in links if people want to get in touch with you. And I hopefully will have you back on the podcast in a period of time and see where else you've gone with all the other bits that you've got going on. So thanks very much.
You are amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I love everything about this podcast, and I love that it's just turned into, yeah, us having a little chat, which feels very authentic for us. So thank you very much for inviting me. It has been my honor and privilege, and keep doing the good stuff that you're doing, Philip. I love every bit of it.
Perfect. Thank you.